Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korean President Lee Jae Myung has wrapped up the U.S. leg of his overseas tour, where artificial intelligence took center stage. During his visit to San Francisco, he unveiled the San Francisco AI Declaration, outlining Korea's ambition to become a key player in the global AI supply chain, while expanding the Korea-U.S. alliance beyond traditional security into technology and innovation. So what does this declaration actually mean for the future of the alliance and Korea's role in the global AI landscape? To discuss that, we're joined in the studio by Professor Min Jeong-hun of the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. A very big welcome.
My pleasure.
So, Professor Min, we would want to start with the latest visit to San Francisco. It focused more on AI rather than security. I wonder, how did you see it? And also, what kind of message do you think Korea was trying to send?
Well, as an expert in the field of diplomacy and security, it was unusual to see that South Korean president visited San Francisco instead of Washington, D.C. or New York. So it shows that the purpose of the visit was to enhance economic and technological cooperation between South Korea and United States. In other words, economic security was the main theme of the visit. And as you know, the major companies from South Korea and the U.S., which attended the San Francisco AI Summit, like Samsung, SK, Hyundai, and Naver, as well as the NVIDIA, OpenAI, Broadcom, Anthropic, and Microsoft, they embarked on a massive AI collaboration encompassing semiconductors, AI data centers, and AI factories, robots, and autonomous driving, which consists of the probably the growth engine for the future economic growth. And this brought the San Francisco AI Declaration, which aimed to foster South Korea as a global AI production base and a key supply chain hub. So personally, I think this collaboration is a follow-up measure to concretize the three major AI mega projects that the South Korean government announced last month. So the President Lee's visit to San Francisco this time shows that the mega projects are starting off and going through the full-scale implementation phase.
Right. Now, speaking of the AI declaration, Professor Min, from a diplomatic standpoint, what do you think is the biggest significance of this?
Well, I think that the San Francisco AI Declaration is South Korea's vision for AI and its determination announced by President Lee Jae Myung at the San Francisco AI Summit. So on the one hand, through the declaration, President Lee unveiled a vision to foster South Korea into global AI production base and innovation hub, and it's also a vision to elevate South Korea into an irreplaceable core country in the global AI, the supply chain. So the plan envisions that South Korea will become a global hub that supplies AI infrastructure based on the world-class semiconductor production capabilities and the manufacturing base. On the other hand, the declaration embodies the determination to elevate South Korea from a mere technology follower into a leading the country that drives the global AI ecosystem and an irreplaceable core hub of the global AI supply chain. You know that nowadays the world is fiercely competing around the high-tech industries and strategic industries. And AI competition is the center of the competition. So the South Korea diplomatically will show the great ambition that it will be the core country which lead the very important the economic engine for the future growth.
Right. So it shows Korea not just as a semiconductor supplier, but also a trusted AI partner from now on. Now, do you think that could actually reshape the role of Korea in terms of ROK-U.S. alliance?
Well, As you know, currently the U.S.-China strategic competition is getting intensified around the advanced technologies and strategic industries, and the AI at the center of the competition. And many countries in the world want to see a reliable leadership and share the benefits of the technological advancements. So based on the national strengths, like a democratic system and resilience, world-class manufacturing capabilities, and economic power, South Korea will be able to play a leading role that the global community can enjoy the benefit of the AI technologies. And such a role can be clearly seen by the Global AI Initiative that President Lee announced at the Gyeongju APEC Summit last year. And the declaration shows that the Global AI Initiative is being activated and moving forward to take its shape. So it will reaffirm that South Korea is a most trustworthy ally and a partner to the United States, and it will also provide the momentum that South Korea will establish itself as a core, global core power.
It sounds like a meaningful shift indeed. Now, President Lee has also said that the alliance should expand beyond security into technology, innovation, and also startups as well. How much of a significance do you see on that?
Well, as President Lee Jae Myung mentioned, the ROK-U.S. alliance needed to be evolved into a comprehensive strategic alliance that expands the scope of their cooperation into security, economy, culture, human exchange, technology, innovation, and startup investment and incubation. And considering that the world is going through a tough competition around the advanced technologies and strategic industries, South Korea needed to secure its future growth engine and competitiveness by strengthening cooperation with the United States and other technologically advanced countries like Europe and Japan. In particular, given that the U.S. holds an advantage in foundational technologies and the capital flow, and it also leads innovation cooperation in high-tech industries. I think it's essential for South Korea to cooperate closely with the U.S. to secure its future growth engines and enhance its competitiveness. In other words, the advanced technologies and strategic industries such as semiconductors, large volume batteries, artificial intelligence, biotechnologies, and the shipbuilding, nuclear power, and the defense industry, they are key to South Korea's future economic growth and prosperity. So I think South Korea needs to enhance its technological capabilities and strengthen its competitiveness through close collaboration with the leaders in the fields, mainly with the United States. So I think it's necessary for the ROK-U.S. alliance to be evolved into the very important field of competition, like the economy, technology, and strategic industries.
Right. So a lot of areas of cooperation and opportunities to look forward to, looking forward. Then, Professor Min, so in order for this declaration to kind of develop into a lasting Korea-U.S. AI partnership, what do you think we should look forward to?
Communication and collaboration. And again, the world is going through the era of information revolution. And it is experiencing and witnessing the fundamental change of the way of life. We stand in the middle of that kind of the dramatic shift. And the South Korea is standing with other major countries in advanced countries, advanced technologies like U.S., China, and Japan and the European Unions. And for the three major mega projects, it's just the beginning of the projects. And personally, I think it will be a long-term projects or the plan to determine South Korea's economic prosperity and its international standing. And I think the Lee Jae Myung presidency is important because it needs to establish a foundation for such important mega projects. So based on the robust ROK-U.S. alliance, the two countries, South Korea and the U.S., continue to maintain each communication and expand the scope of depth of their collaboration and the cooperation. The importance of value of South Korea still is very big for the United States and then other major technological advanced countries. So, we have the plenty of room and the possibility that the South Korea will enhance its cooperation with the United States. So communicate and collaborate.
A very important reminder to conclude our discussion tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Min.
Thanks so much.
So that was the diplomatic picture, but ultimately the success of the San Francisco AI Declaration will also be measured by its economic impact. So from investment and innovation to Korea's competitiveness in the global AI race, let's also take a closer look by connecting to Hwa-Kyun Kim, Professor of Banking and Finance at Texas A&M University's Mays Business School. Welcome to the program, Professor Kim.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
So, Professor, let's dive right into the economic impact. So, among the main outcomes of the visit were the semiconductor partnerships between Korean companies and major global AI firms as well. How significant could those partnerships actually be?
Well, I think it is significant, definitely. And in terms of report the dollar amount, I look at the press reports and it was around $950 billion or about 1,400 trillion won. So it's obviously a pretty big number. If you look into the details, then it actually has included a couple of things, SK's letter of intent with NVIDIA. That I think seems to be around 500 billion, and Samsung's actually MOU with Broadcom is around 200 billion. I think it's also interesting that they're sort of somewhat divided in terms of the alliances team. And also some of the other arrangements Hyundai and the Google and NVIDIA and also all others Boston Dynamics. But these are supply revenue, some cap expenditure, and some of them are just estimate because these are mostly just memoranda or letter of intents. Things will get a little more detailed, I think, as time goes by, as people just get to know more about this. But to me, what stands out, I think, a little more was the duration of these potential contracts. So as we know, memory has always been a textbook example of the cyclical businesses. So contracts typically ran roughly a year, and prices actually swung very, very in a volatile fashion, as we also now see in terms of stock prices, actually about the future expectations of these prices in supply. And everybody, in a sense, built capacity at the top, and then a lot of capex. And the industry is probably going to, to spend a lot of money, and some of which will be probably just excess actually supply in some sense. So what these agreements potentially do is move Korea's two largest suppliers, Samsung and the SK Hynix, over at least 3 to 5 year longer term agreements, which I think this is a structural change in terms of how the industries actually do the business for this matter. And I think this is actually helping a lot, I think, Korean firms, because they can now do a little more with confidence in terms of their capex expenditure, I think. So that actually, if it is going to be really happening with the 5 year contracts or even 3 to 7 year or whatever this longer term than 1 year, this is going to be definitely helpful for Korean companies to do more stable businesses. And also, I think the bargaining story is, somewhat involved here in that now from the standpoint of the market making, actually the position, the Samsung and Hynix and other Korean companies actually can probably just play more leading roles in terms of setting the prices or negotiating more actively in terms of these facilities and things like that. So yes, caveat is it's still MOU and letter of intent, but if it actually is going to be really happening, I think this is a great thing.
Then, Professor Kim, if those kinds of partnerships actually proceed to move forward, President Lee said he hopes to position Korea as both a global AI supply hub and a testing ground for AI technologies as well. How realistic or feasible is that goal?
Well, it depends on how we define. I mean, in terms of AI hub part, the first part, I think in a sense, the Korea is already, I think, a AI hub because it provides the most important parts of the AI businesses. So it builds memory, it builds actually the SSD, so all this kind of the HBM, right? So in a sense, given that the Korea actually provides almost like 70 to 80% of this, the high bandwidth memory and stuff like that, in a sense, it's already almost like 80% done in terms of AI hub. Of course, if we narrow this, into the multiple sort of spokes, then I think we have to think about like a software side and other parts. So that one, I think, is probably what the President Lee was trying to also, I think, improve upon or wants to just reach. If that's the part, then I think the Korea has to make additional efforts actually for the other parts of the AI businesses, which clearly is somewhat lacking, but I think clearly catching up. So I think those kind of the software part and other parts of the chips like logic chips and things like that, I think would be the next in line to accomplish this AI hub status. In terms of the testing bed, if this refers to the user base, I'm sure that the Korea is not going to be lacking in that regard because I think I saw reports that I think the Korean people seem to be one of the most the actively just adopting the AI technology. So I think there will be enough users, and I think who would be interested in using the early the stages of this AI softwares and then also the technologies. What's going to be tougher, I think, for this testing ground is more like, this new hardwares and services and etc. I think for that, I think the energy and all other actually parts should be also involved because at the end of the day, you have to make things and to make things you need like energy such as electricity and other things. So I think for that part, probably the Korean government together with the local governments and also the companies actually have to do some additional work.
Right, but on the flip side, researchers and entrepreneurs, they still point to some challenges like visa barriers, limited long-term research support, and attracting global talent as well. Which of these or others do you see as the biggest obstacle moving forward?
I think you mentioned well. So I think in terms of like these, basically at the end of the day, we need people. Human capital, I think, is going to be probably always the number one item at the end of the day. Once, of course, the general level AI is developed, maybe something different. But I still, even at this stage, human capital is going to be probably the top priority. So in terms of like, doing these research support and the attracting global talent and all these kind of things, Korea is clearly somewhat lacking, I think. The visiting, I think, for just small conferences and things like that, I think that Korea is actually doing great in terms of like visa and everything. But for longer term support, and especially for those kind of the potentially failing businesses, right? The research. We never know when this is going to take off. So I think it is important, for the government or the companies actually to give some commitments to the researchers and universities. Even if it looks like, it's not really working, it has to actually have a little more patience so that I think this is going to eventually work. So for that type of things, maybe it's related to the Korean culture, but I think the Korea seems to prefer like, really fast sort of responses and then development for that one is not going to be always the helpful for this type of the big interactions and the new developments because it's a new era in some sense, right? So we never know what's going to happen in terms of how this one turns into the next. When we think about like the internet era, clearly it was actually evolving a lot, I think, over the last 2 decades. So I think we will actually see even more changes and the big the shifts. So I think the patience and the strong and the sustainable support, I think, from both the government, university, companies actually will be very necessary for this.
It will be interesting to see how those challenges would be addressed by the country. Now, finally, Professor Kim, if you would name just one priority that would enable the government to focus on to turn the San Francisco Declaration into lasting investment, what would it be?
From the government side, I would say the cost side of these, the social overhead, I think, projects. So I think I would say energy and electricity, because these kind of the new capex and then the new mega projects seem to involve a lot of electricity and energy. I'm sure that I think the experts actually will work on this, but the financing and also the providing these the electricity, the power plants and all this kind of things actually takes time. So I think the planning well is going to be extremely important in this regard, and also the related financing part is not going to be a trivial issue. So I think I would call like the cost side of these the projects actually as the big priority at this stage.
Right. So it'll certainly be interesting to see whether this declaration could actually become a lasting turning point for Korea's AI strategy. Professor Kim, thank you so much for your insights tonight.
Always a pleasure.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.